This panel is one of the most, they're all important, but one of the most important of the day. I have talked about the importance of collaboration with democratic institutions, and I have also talked about the collaboration with artists. This first panel is about that collaboration with artists and about the importance of art in helping fire our democratic imagination, working with those who use their imagination as a tool in trade to help us think about our current state and our future. In 2016, I was in a conversation with Isabel Wilkerson after the election, in which she said that she thought we were headed into a new nadir. The nadir, or the nadir, is the lowest point, said Rayford Logan, the historian, for Black people after Reconstruction. And although I didn't want to believe her, you know that she's something of a Cassandra, Isabel Wilkerson. She kind of knows things, so I was shook. And so I wanted to know, what did we do during the nadir? So I started to study, what did we do? I mean, we didn't just roll up and die, we did stuff. It turns out we did a lot of stuff. We did a lot of stuff. And so I became very interested in the movements that developed during that period, but most importantly, in the role of artists. In this period that we consider the worst period for Black people, we had the Harlem Renaissance. We had artists writing amazing things. In my own study of lynching, seeing how artists were able to say things that others could not say in their music, in their poetry, in their short stories. They were dealing with these subjects that politically we couldn't make a move on. And so I know that the collaboration with artists and the artist voice is critical as we think about who we are next going to be. I spent a year at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, working on this concept, and y'all almost lost me. I'm just telling you right now. I love me some MoMA. I loved being there. I loved the wonderful team and how graciously I was received. I loved the excellence of these people, how committed they were to excellence, how curious they were at all times, wanting to learn. And I was like, you know, I've had a good run with this law thing, but I think if I really apply myself, I know I don't have any talent to be an artist, but I could be some kind of something, art, something, something. So, but I anyway continued the work of this collaboration and just having the opportunity to talk with extraordinary artists about the work that they are doing that directly is in the space and in the conversations that we are having. One set of artists that have been crucial and have been ahead of the curve are those who have been addressing issues of monuments. Now, most of us came to start talking about monuments in 2020 after we saw the video of George Floyd, and many people began to gather about these Confederate monuments. In fact, it was probably Charlottesville that started it in 2017, where you had the Proud Boys come out to protect a Confederate monument. And so between 2017 and 2020, we started this whole project happening in communities all over the country of noticing that we had these revered Confederate generals that were sitting above us in our communities, both North and South. I mean, I remember the night they came down in Baltimore. And Baltimore was never even part of the Confederacy. Had slavery, but wasn't part of the Confederacy. And so we started to notice this, and this robust conversation began about our public spaces and about monuments. Many of these monuments were taken down, many of them were defaced, there were protests, there were all kinds of ways of addressing the monuments. But what people don't know is that there's some people who had long before that been talking about, thinking about, engaging with this issue of monuments, and those were artists. And one of them was the brilliant visual artist, photographer, dancer, queen, goddess herself, yes. Carrie Mae Weems. And you can't imagine what it means to have her with us today. And so she's going to talk to us a little bit about her work, but we're going to keep it so truncated. It's going to be 5 minutes. It's going to move. Leah Dickerman is the director of research programs at MoMA. I'm sorry, Carrie Mae Weems is an artist in residence at Syracuse University, by the way. And she just had a fantastic conference last week, Monumental Concerns was the name of it, I believe. It's the second iteration of that conference, really unbelievable. Leah Dickerman is the director of research programs at MoMA. She was my Sherpa and boss when I was having my fellowship there, and she's done some extraordinary research and is going to share some really just powerful stuff with us that she has uncovered in her research about monuments and about artists in this period. And then finally, Saeed Jones the brilliant poet. I just got a text from my daughter who has COVID and couldn't come and said she is literally lying across the bed prostrate, that she's not meeting you. But whose poetry is so moving, so powerful, so revelatory. I came to, I think it was Prelude to a Bruise, was that the first one? That's
Yes.
the first book of poems that I remember reading. Then I brought my daughter How We Fight for Our Lives. I brought my daughter that. That's how she came to know you.
Oh, wow.
And then during the pandemic, he wrote a set of poems called Alive at the End of the World. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about two of his poems and how they compel us also to think in our democratic imagination about what we want for the future. So first, give it up for the queen, Carrie Mae Weems.
That's you, Carrie.
I'll stand.
Okay.
Hey, hello. I just want to, I did write some notes, but I'm not going to look at them. I just want to just talk a little bit. Are most of you lawyers? Who am I speaking to? Are you lawyers for the most part?
Lawyers, law students.
Right? Lawyers.
Artists.
Right. So I've been doing this work, all of the same work, for many years. And I always say that nobody had to pay me to do what I'm doing.
Come on.
Nobody did pay me to do what I'm doing, right? You know that I'm deeply curious, and I followed my passion. I decided that I needed to put myself, my body, use this skin as a way of moving through the world with a set of curiosities that were important to me. But I knew that because I'm no different than most people, and certainly most Black people who've had a similar experience, that I would be speaking to you, you, beside you, and behind you, right? That I see myself in you because I see.
Can we fix the sound?
Right? And so I started doing projects, whether I was working on, COVID-19, because I realized that it was going to be incredibly important, that Black people were going to be deeply impacted, that working people were going to be deeply impacted by COVID-19. I started working on it the day that I heard about it, and developed all kinds of strategies, billboards, placards, shopping bags, buttons, masks, anything that I could think of that could go out to homes, ways of delivering systems of material to people, masks and hand sanitizer, all of these things. I was doing almost immediately, and asking anybody who would listen if they would loan me some money so that I could make whatever it was that I was making, or use my own money to do whatever it was that I was doing. I've done projects around monuments for years, and will probably continue doing so because it's important to me. What's in public space is important for me to understand, and to acknowledge and to use and to craft in interesting ways that I find interesting and important. But the thing that I want to say to you, that I want to employ you to do, we know that the world would be nothing without the sound of Aretha and Marvin and Prince, maybe Beyonce, right? Like we are relying on the artist to deliver their poetic utterance for us, right? We do that whether we're listening to music, whether we're doing it through poetry or literature. Toni was my girl. I'd read her and drop to my knees. She would say things so beautiful and so powerfully. But most of you don't really use the arts in your lives. And most organizations don't use artists in their organizations. And one of the things that I've come to understand, because of the way in which artists work, the way in which they sort of exist outside of the box of things,
in that they're not bureaucratic, and they are inventive, and they are expressive, and they are resourceful, and they are engaging, and they are provocative. That probably every organization that I can think of worth its salt should have an artist on its team. Not as a second thought, not as a maybe down the road, not as when we're ready to do a gala and we need to like auction off a little bit of work, but rather, right, really on your team as a part of your imaginative strategy for moving ideas, creative ideas, forward into the world. And one of the things that we do is that we craft things in order to be heard, as Ava was just talking about, right? Right? The way in which we know her, the way in which we understand her, is by crafting a narrative that can be heard. Not all of us have that talent, right? But artists often do. And so the extent to which I think you think of how you might strategically move your organization and the ideas forward relative to justice, equal justice, change. I have an idea about 250 and change as we celebrate the next, the anniversary of the country that is coming next year, 250 and change, right? How do we use these ideas to sort of foster a deeper appreciation for the work, for the strategy, for the organizing, for the thought, for the creativity, for the messaging? Because every day, Donald Trump will be there. Every day, he is sending out his message. And how do we begin as an organized force in whatever way we can to counter some of those ideas? And I think that we counter them by being organized. We counter them by bringing forth incredible messaging. And we do that through the engagement of extraordinary artists who are in your communities and who are dying to be a part of the system of things and of change. Yeah. So that is what I'd like to say and share with you today.
So beautiful. And the images that you're seeing on the screen are Carrie Mae Weems' photographs and work. We've been showing them.
Well, this project in particular, I started thinking I was invited to do to think about a public art project. What do I need to put in public? Does it need to be figurative? Not necessarily. But I have been thinking about banned books. There are approximately 750 banned books on the list that cannot be read, and this is down the street from the Brooklyn Public Library, and so I thought that I would build a monument to remind my community of the books that have been banned thus far. That's the public monument that I'm actually working on for the city of Brooklyn.
Fantastic. Love it. Love it. Leah Dickerman.
Good afternoon. Can you imagine what fun it is to let Sherilyn Ifill loose in a museum? So one of the things that I became convinced of is that she had an inner art historian in her. But of course, she's social justice girl. So what is the mashup of those two things? And it's the curator of democratic imagination. And I think that's the role that she has now.
That's good. That's good.
And Sherilyn asked me to think about the role of artists in cultural activism and the work of envisioning and the way I think that this often takes place. I'm going to give some historical perspective to this in an alliance among artists and historians and activists. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I know that Sherilyn wants to do at the 14th Amendment Center, is nurture those relationships. And how important it is to be thinking about culture right now, because it's very clear that the politics of our present are very much a struggle over history, over culture, And we shouldn't mistake this. The current administration has certainly recognized this. It's been an extraordinary degree of focus with a number of executive actions far beyond closing or taking over the Kennedy Center. There's book banning, and there's restrictions on the kind of history that has been taught, and regulations on what kinds of federal buildings should be built, calls to dismantle the NEA and the NEH, the redirection of funds from the NEA from regional organizations to the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. There's some irony there, but that's certainly a pushback to the date of origin, the 1776 date instead of the 1619 date of origin. There's been ideological deportation. Just days ago, a Native Canadian composer named Andrew Balfour, who was expected at a concert in Carnegie Hall, was turned away at the border. And today's executive action, which Carrie Mae Weems sent to me, and was directed at the Smithsonian, and it was given the extraordinarily Orwellian title, Restoring Truth and Sanity in American History.
Wow.
So with all that, if we think of this context, I want to show you what a group of artists and historians did together in another moment of great cultural monolithic control. And I'm going to show you something that very few people have seen before, and it's a map. It's the end papers of a book that was published in 1940 called The Negro in Virginia, and the authors were identified as the workers of the Writers Program of the Works Progress Administration in the state of Virginia. It's modest in scale, and as you can imagine, it was hidden from first sight. You'd have to open the covers to see this map, but I think it's really radical in implication because this map was made in the wake of several decades of Confederate monument building that positioned statues in the hundreds and even thousands across the 13 states of the former Confederacy, many in northern states too. And even now, there are more statues to Confederate leaders than the victorious forces of the North, and we're reading from the current administration about the desire to re-erect some of the Confederate monuments that have been taken down. So I think what this map was asking in that context was a question about whether an alternative commemorative environment could be imagined. So who made this map? It was a UPenn educated architect named William H. Moses Jr. He had won the design competition for a pavilion, the Virginia State Pavilion, for the World's Expo in 1939 in Queens, but he wasn't listed as the project architect because of his race. And the history told is notable, and it's hard for, you can see there's a legend in the upper left, and it's hard for me to see it right now, but the very first of the memory sites that's indicated in this map is the arrival of slaves in Jamestown in 1619. So that's the idea that Virginia and America begins with slavery. Some of the other sites that are indicated on the map are sites of resistance. We have Nat Turner's Rebellion and John Brown's raid. Others mark sites of tragedy, of cruel notoriety. Number 13 is Lumpkin Slave Jail in Richmond, which was both a human clearinghouse and a prison. The Civil War was represented, but in a very different way than the iconography of a lost cause. Number 16 was the Battle of Crater. I didn't know what that was until I encountered this map. I know we have some more buffs here. How many of you have heard of the Battle of Crater? So it was a rout of Union troops where many of the soldiers, the US colored troops, were massacred after surrender. It was in the hundreds of people that were killed in the wake of the surrender at the Battle of Crater. So that's on the map. The surrender at Appomattox is number 17. African American labor is called out on the map with work in the cotton fields, the coal mines, the apple orchards, the oyster farms, tobacco fields, and timber forests. And then there are Black institutions of higher labor. We've had a running note of which institutions are most powerful, but here is Hampton Institute, Virginia Union College, Virginia State College, and a couple others, all marked on the map. And there's heroism too. So there's Gilbert Hunt, who was an enslaved blacksmith who rescued scores of people from a burning fire in 1811, and York, who explored the Northwest, and Lewis and Clark aren't mentioned. So all of this is interesting to me because I think it stands as a commemorative landscape in which the authors of this map understood that these are the monuments that might have been, that in the political context that they faced, that they couldn't have been built. And I think in the way that you can imagine the closing of the cover of a book to be found generations later, that this is a map, this is a message for us. And so the question is, how do we receive it? And another thing that's interesting to think about is how did they come to making this map? And Moses was part of a group that worked alongside others at the WPA's Office of Negro Affairs, which was founded in 1936. The director was the poet Sterling Brown. Sterling Brown was Williams and Harvard educated, and also the son of an enslaved father. And he had served together on the organizing committee of the exhibition to mark the 75th anniversary of the 13th Amendment that was organized at the Library of Congress. And his cohort included Lawrence Reddick, Carter Woodson, Elaine Knox, so speak about founders. That's another group of founders for you. And the exhibition that they organized was determined to be based on facts, on documents. It was a documentary history of Black experience in America. And Brown picked this up as the mantra for the Department of Negro Affairs. He saw the division as representing African Americans within WPA initiatives as representing the Negro race adequately and without bias. So as part of this initiative, he picked up on something that Lawrence Reddick had been doing, which was leading a dozen graduate students. He was a faculty member at Kentucky State University in collecting the testimony of former enslaved people. Within the Department of Negro Affairs, Sterling Brown brought this up to scale. And this fit within the larger construct of some of the things that the WPA was interested in doing, which was collecting the life histories of ordinary Americans. Well, that was part of it. Writers, reporters were sent out into the field to record oral histories, and not just formerly enslaved people, but elderly Virginians in general, to hear about their life histories and their stories. They were accompanied by people who were trained in folk history methodologies by Alan Lomax. They were often accompanied by photographers. And The Negro in Virginia, the book, brought all of these documents together to mobilize these first-person testimonies and archival materials, including probates and other types of courthouse documents, mobilizing the archive against lost cause mythology, which I think has a few clues for us. So it was a history that was rigorously conducted from primary documents, and Sterling Brown recounted that he and his colleague Ulysses Lee took the manuscript and edited it into the final form themselves. So you can think of this book as combating the truthiness, the appearance of truth of lost cause mythology with document and data and testimony.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leah. That map is just gold and just makes your brain explode at what might have been. How might we be talking about this period if this were the map of monuments that we were accustomed to? Saeed,
Hi.
how do you want to do this? You want me to say something and then you read, or you want to say something and then we talk about what you read?
Yeah, I can say something and then we can talk about it.
Good.
Yeah.
I prefer that too.
Yeah. Sherilyn's about the only person that can get me to come to DC at this point. I was like, all right, girl, for you. But no, it's a joy to be here. I've learned so much. I think we've all been colored. She gave me an assignment that felt really fortuitous because my next memoir is titled Home Out There. And it is about how Black queer people in particular, we often have to leave home in order to arrive at an understanding of home. And I'm weaving my own personal experiences with the biographies of Polly Murray, a proud graduate of Howard Law School, first woman enrolled at Howard Law School, Langston Hughes and Audre Lorde, and then in the notes for this, Sherilyn mentioned Langston and Polly Murray, and I was like, okay, all right, this is a reason to go to DC. So I'm gonna this is gonna be quick. I'm gonna keep it quick and cute. I'm gonna be the drag queen you actually want to tip. You're welcome. I'm going to start with a short, it's one of my favorite poems by Langston Hughes. It's only 4 lines long, and I would like to dedicate it to everyone who has enabled this administration. Evil. Looks like what drives me crazy don't have no effect on you, but I'm going to keep at it till it makes you crazy too. Thank you. Langston smiled, but he was also very mischievous.
He was.
He really was. What I wanted to say in this offering, this relationship between poetry in particular and democracy is the democratic imagination entirely depends on language. Right? We talk about the concept. I don't need to explain to people at law school. It's entirely dependent on language. So let's talk about what language does. Language creates, changes, and strengthens reality itself. An example, I'm an artist in residence at Harvard Medical School, and an example I like to point to my students is if you've read Homer's The Iliad or the Odyssey, the ocean, the sea, is not blue. The Greeks had not discovered the word blue by that point. In the Odyssey and the Iliad, the ocean is wine dark or green. Only when the word blue comes into use do people suddenly start seeing it everywhere. And I think that's a great example to show how language literally creates reality. I thought it was really interesting in the conversation with Ava, and Sherilyn was talking about the center, and you said, once you say you're doing it, you know what I mean? Or you were saying, just get on the train, right? Once we're able to say, I'm doing this thing, right? That language creates action, and then, everything organizes around it. And that's important because poetry is a close, attentive celebration of language, image, and sound. It was incredible to hear a judge quoting Langston Hughes's, Crystal Stare, which, by the way, he wrote after an argument with his horrible father. His father was incredibly anti-black, and anti-black. He would make Clarence Thomas jealous, and incredibly misogynist. And so they're at their home in Mexico, in Toluca, and he's having an argument mocking Langston's mom, his former wife. And that night, he writes, "Life for me ain't been no crystal stair." Langston uses language to conjure a Black woman as a source of wisdom in refutation of her father. So, okay, I'm gonna read 2 poems that Sherilyn requested. You can't say no. You can't say, that's what you run around museums. Crazy. Alive at the end of the world. The end of the world was mistaken for just another midday massacre in America. Brain matter and broken glass, blurred boot prints and pools of blood. We dialed the newly dead, but they wouldn't answer. We texted, begging them to call us back, but The newly dead don't know how to read. In America, a gathering of people is called target practice or a funeral, depending on who lives long enough to define the terms. But for now, we are alive at the end of the world, shell-shocked by headlines and alarm clocks, burning through what little love we have left. With time, the white boys with guns will become wounds we won't quite remember enduring. How did you get that scar on your shoulder? Oh, a boy I barely knew with sad ones. And then this last poem I'm going to read. Oh, thank you. I'm always interested in writing about, the intersection of sex, race, gender, and power. I'm not just a black man, I'm a black queer man. And it's really fascinating the things you see about like how white women exercise their privilege. Sorry, as in pathetic. Without a glance over her shoulder, a white woman walks right through me to reach her next spike-heeled hour. And in a life lived between breath and sigh, I wait for her to mouth a quick, sorry. Nothing more. Just a glance to say, I've been seen. But once, I was lost on a late-night street, and when I asked the woman walking just ahead of me for help, she screamed, "Oh, God!" and clutched her purse, the way the night holds me. I told her I was sorry, then felt sorry for saying sorry. I think of that woman often. I doubt she ever thinks of me. Thank you.
I hope you can begin to see the possibilities of the conversations that we need to be having with artists about what we are trying to do in this country, and that we are able to recognize precisely what Carrie Mae Weems said at the outset, that we need partnership, not artists to be tagged on as pure entertainment, not as an afterthought, but as critical to understanding how we can move forward. And so I am so thrilled that these three amazing artists and art adjacent and curators were able to be with us today, and there are others in the audience. This is a partnership I care deeply about. We have a short film, which we don't have time to show, that she's shaking her head no, that we made with the help of many of the folks from MoMA, that explores this more deeply and contains excerpts of my conversations with the folks at MoMA and with other artists about this very subject, and it's incredibly beautiful. And so maybe when this is over, we'll show it, and you just have to lean up real close to try to hear it, but we're gonna find a way. Sound people, y'all please just help us. Anyway, we wanna show it, but we can't show it right now. I want you to join me in a round of applause for this extraordinary panel.